It had been a snowy day. Katie discovered that if you don't do your boots up properly, your socks get wet. Orbie discovered that you have to take awfully big steps to walk in Dad's footprints. And they both discovered that if you drag your feet in the snow, it makes long snake-like patterns behind you. Katie's great-uncle David decided to move out of his big house in Kanata because it was just too hard for someone who was 80 years old to take care of. He was moving into a senior's home near Katie and Orbie. Mom, Dad, Katie, and Orbie were going to be the welcoming committee. Orbie was so excited that Uncle David was moving closer to them that he made a wonderful sign for his new door. It was made of paper and sparkles and ribbon and had 3 little jingle bells. Katie painted a picture of her family and Orbie so that Uncle David could see them when he wanted to. Mom brought Uncle David a little make-your-own window box garden because Uncle David was sad about leaving his wonderful backyard garden. Dad brought him a walking stick. Uncle David loved to go for walks. Katie thought about how exciting moving to a new home was. She couldn't wait to see the home Uncle David had chosen. Finally, they walked up to the building. It didn't look like a house. Dad explained that this was a house to a lot of older people. They lived together to keep each other company. Orbie thought that was a great idea. Once they were through the front door, Mom noticed a woman in a wheelchair. She was waiting for a bus to pick her up. Dad noticed that the building was nice and clean. Katie and Orbie noticed that there was a great big room with a carpet. There were 2 men working on a puzzle, and another group of people setting up what looked like a little stage or something. It looked very exciting. As they headed toward Uncle David's room, they heard a pinging sort of ponging noise. And when they peeked in, they saw a great big ping-pong table and a table where some men were playing cards. Wow, neat place, Katie said. With a toot, Orbie agreed. When they found Uncle David's room, he was sitting on the bed. Katie noticed that he didn't look too happy to be in his new home. Mom smiled, a big smile, and they all walked in. He cheered up as soon as he saw them and gave everybody a big hug. He loved their presents, and Mom and Dad helped him put each one of them in a fine place. The last thing was Mom's window box garden. Dad set it on the window ledge, and Katie thought that maybe Uncle David was going to cry. Katie asked, "Great Uncle David, don't you like Mom's window box garden?" There were tears in his eyes for sure, as Uncle David leaned down to Katie. He told Katie that he loved Mom's garden, and that he missed the garden he'd had in his own house. Orbie orbled, "Why didn't he bring it with him?" Uncle David told them that you can't move a garden. Dad asked him how he was settling in, and Uncle David shrugged his shoulders. He hadn't really met anyone yet, but he was sure that he'd made the right decision. Katie asked him if he'd already played ping pong. Uncle David looked at her. He hadn't done much of that since his wife Aunt Jane had passed away. He looked sad again. Katie moved over to Uncle David. "I'm not very good at hitting the ball back," she said, "but I don't mind running after it if you want to play with me." He did start to say no thank you when a funny thing happened. He looked around at all the family. He wanted them to be happy, but really it was up to him to try. "Well, all right, just one game," he said. Katie and Orbie bolted out the door and down to the ping pong room. Mom and Dad and Uncle David laughed right out loud and followed. The ping pong table was free, and Katie hurried over to pick up a paddle. When Uncle David picked up the other paddle, he told everyone it had been a long time. He said he wasn't even sure he could still play. Well, he could play, and there was a pink whirling blur behind Katie as Orbie caught the balls that Katie missed and threw them back. Katie laughed so hard that pretty soon everyone was having fun, even the people playing cards. They came over to meet Uncle David and his family. They wanted to know if Uncle David knew how to play cards. Katie told them that Dad said Uncle David knew almost everything. Uncle David smiled and nodded his head. Orbie bugled his excitement by going up to the next room down the hall. There was a giant puzzle and some kind of show going on. He grabbed Uncle David's hand and led him there. Katie bounced along beside them. Inside the room, the people doing the puzzle looked up when Orbie pulled Uncle David in. They wanted him to stop and help them with their puzzle. But Orbie was heading somewhere else, so Uncle David said maybe later. Katie told them that she was very good at puzzles and sometime won puzzle races. She stood at the table and helped them place some pieces. Mom helped too. Dad, Orbie, and Uncle David approached the people who were setting up on the stage. Orbie burbled at Dad to ask them what they were getting ready for. When Dad asked, they told him it was karaoke night. Orbie didn't know what karaoke meant, so Uncle David explained that it meant that there was music in a machine and you sang along with it. One of the ladies asked Uncle David if he liked to sing. Dad laughed and put his arm around Uncle David's shoulder. My uncle used to sing in Barry's Barbershop Quartet. The lady asked if that was the Barry's Barbershop Quartet, and Uncle David smiled broadly. It was. Orbie wondered if Uncle David cut hair. Dad explained that a barbershop quartet was a kind of singing group. Orbie wanted Uncle David to sing for him, and Uncle David said that he hadn't sung in a long time. The lady said what a shame that was. She hoped he would sing again one day. Uncle David's cheeks went red, and then he said maybe he would. When it was time to go home, Uncle David hugged them goodbye. Dad said they'd be back soon, which thrilled Katie and Orbie. Katie said she thought his new house was as good as living at the playground. She just knew Uncle David was going to love it there. And do you know, on that very night, Great Uncle David sang for the first time in 15 years. Everyone loved it so much. They clapped and clapped and clapped. Uncle David couldn't stop smiling. Katie was right. He was going to be very happy in his new home. And I, for one, am glad. Aren't you?
Did you know? Did you know? Did you know? Most animals love to take baths. Birds have their bird bath. Elephants like a shower. And hippos spend a lot of time just soaking. But some other animals would really prefer to stay a long way away from water.